Alright guys, before starting the actual coding, I would like to describe a sample structure of an Express application. It will follow the model view controller pattern. So we have controllers, models, and we have views. In each of the folders we have situated different files which correspond to this logic. We also have routes and validators. So basically, initially we are creating one project using npm, and since we would like to focus on the development, we have NodeMon, which is performing the main logic, and using Babel we're transforming our JavaScript files to be able to be transpiled and understandable by NodeJS. So this allows us to use ECMAScript 6 syntax and to write a modern JavaScript in Node.js. So now we know how we can set up our project. Here is our index.html. Basically, we are using Mongoose to be able to connect to MongoDB. We're using Express to be able to serve our application. And we're reading our secrets from .env file. It's important to do so because by having environmental files, inside of here we can store secret information, and we might not include them later in the repository if we are uploading the code to GitHub. Let's start with our routes. So basically routes are allowing us to grab certain URL and to respond to its invocation. So for example, if this URL is fetched from a JavaScript application or a browser, and we are using the post method, we'll be redirecting the processing of this URL to the following function here. The same way we can handle GET requests, so to the same URL. So by using GET request, whenever someone is browsing user register, we'll be sending the following HTML file to the user. And what is specific here is that especially for the URL of info, we would like to use a middleware. So instead of directly sending the request into a specific function info inside of our application, we would like beforehand to use authentication. So this will be our middleware out, which is basically one file which we are importing. And once this authentication passes, it will allow us to browse the URL. Let's now take a look at the models. Basically, the models are allowing us to define a schema for the data types we would like to store into our database. Here we are creating one user schema, and inside of the user schema we are defining fields such as email and password, and also we are defining on which conditions they have to rely in order to be correct, such as maximum length, and we are defining also that the users should have unique email in order to be stored in the application. Then we are adding automatically created and updated fields by using a timestamp property. What's more interesting here is that we can define specific methods which belong to this schema and later use them in the code, so not to pollute our controllers, but to use directly the models methods. And here we're using them for encrypting the password field and validating the password also. Next is the controller. Basically, the controller function is to perform action on a request we are receiving and render a view. Also, in between, controller can handle actions and perform data operations using the model. So we can see here that we're using Mongoose model, and then we're performing certain actions in order to add a new user. After everything is ready, we form a JSON request and we send this to the view. Since we're using REST APIs, this will be the output that our client-side application will receive. And now we can see one view. So here we are having a basic HTML form. Then we are using JavaScript. With the JavaScript, we're sending information to our REST API URLs, using here, for example, post method, and then we are rendering a response directly in the HTML, again using JavaScript. So that's the basic structure of one sample Node.js application. And now we can start coding our project.